Thank you. The topic of policing reform is a national discussion. As youth, our voices and concerns are often overshadowed by the adults in the room when there is a discussion on major topics. Today, our voices are highlighted. We are a group of emerging leaders who are concerned with how police serve our communities. We appreciate for the law enforcement officials who are with us today to hear our concerns and answer our questions. We have representatives from Newport News, Chesapeake, Norfolk, Virginia State Police, FBI, and Hampton Police Department. In a few moments, the bios of each of our panelists will be read by my Scholar Academy peers. After the bios are read, we will move into a Q&A discussion. The questions being asked today were developed by the youth who asked the question. After the question is asked, the panelists will be given an opportunity to respond. After the panelist has ended their response, we will move on to another question. Once all scholars have asked their questions, if panelists, sorry, questions, if time allows, questions will be taken from the floor. We will now have the reading of our bios for our panelists. And to our panelists, please raise your hand as your bio is being read. First, we will have Scholar Ian Lindo. Please stand, introduce yourself, and read the bio for Assistant Chief Daryl N. Howard.
Hello, my name is Ian Lindo, and I'm a sophomore at IC Norfolk High School. Assistant Chief Daryl N. Howard began a successful law enforcement career with the Norfolk Police Department in February of 2002. During his career, he has served in a leadership role in all three bureaus of the department: administrative services, field operations, and investigative services. After 15 years of service, he was selected Assistant Chief of Police in January of 2017. Throughout his career, Chief Howard has focused his efforts on providing leadership and support to men and women in the policing profession. During his assignments, Chief Howard has worked with his subordinates to implement enhanced policing strategies geared towards community engagement, crime reduction, organizational leadership training, and officer wellness. Chief Howard holds a Bachelor of Sociology degree from Virginia State University. In addition to his undergraduate studies, he played baseball for VSU and the NCAA Division II. He also earned a Master of Criminology from St. Leo University. Furthermore, he is the recipient of the Medal of Valor and has received commendations to include Officer of the Month, Officer of the First Quarter, the Community Inspirational Empowerment Award, and a Community Service Award. Chief Howard is an active member of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives and served as the chapter president for Hampton Roads. Chief Howard is also a member of the International Association of Chiefs of Police, the Virginia Association of Chiefs of Police, the Hampton Roads Chiefs of Police Association, and the Fraternal Order of Police, Lodge 3. In addition to his law enforcement service, Chief Howard volunteers in the communities of Hampton Roads and participates in education programs such as the Life Enrichment Center, which provides weekly literacy tutoring for elementary school students. Chief Howard's leadership philosophy is to be available, valuable, and visible to the men and women he has been called to serve as police executive.
Thank you, Ian. Now we will have the reading for Chief Steve Drew from Scholar Deshaun Foster. Please introduce yourself and read the bio for Chief Steve Drew.
Hello, I am Deshaun Foster Jr. I attend Booker T. Washington Middle and Newport News. I'm in sixth grade and I'll be reading about Chief Steve Drew. Chief Steve Drew has over 29 years of service and law enforcement experience. He received a Bachelor's of Arts degree in Social Services from Urbana University in 1993 and a master's degree in business from Colorado State University in 2013. Chief Drew served 25 years in the Richmond Police Department and retired on July 1st, 2018 as a deputy chief. He served as a sergeant in the Narcotics Division, a lieutenant in Homeland Security, and a captain in the Homicide Division. He was later promoted to a major in charge of support services, and in 2015 was promoted to deputy chief over patrol operations. Drew was selected as the Newport News Police Chief on July 2nd, 2018.
Thank you, Deshaun. Scholar Gabriel Lane, please introduce yourself and read the bio for Chief Mark Solsky.
Morning. My name is Gabriel Laney. I go to Oscar Smith High School, and I'm in the 9th grade. Chief Mark Skolecki began his career with the Chesapeake Police Department in September 1986. Before this, he served in the United States Navy. Chief Skolecki has served in many capacities throughout the department, rose through the ranks, and was appointed Chief of Police in September 2022. Chief Skolecki earned a bachelor's degree in criminology from St. Leo University and a master's degree in public administration from Old Dominion University. Additionally, Chief Skolecki is a graduate for the Administrative Officers Management Program at North Carolina State University, the Professional Executive Leadership School at the University of Richmond, and the West Point Leadership Training at the Virginia Beach Law Enforcement Training Academy. Chief Skolecki leads a growing department with over 400 sworn police officers and 200 dedicated civilian employees. Chief Skolecki, along with all the members of the police department, have a strong commitment to community policing and provide a wide range of innovative and professional law enforcement services to the citizens of Chesapeake.
Thank you, Gabriel. Scholar Ian Birdsong, please stand, introduce yourself, and read the bio for Chief Mark E. Talbot.
My name is Ian Birdsong. I go to Hickory High School, future BCU student. So we have Police Chief Talbot. Chief Mark E. Talbot Sr. was appointed Chief of Police for the Hampton Police Division on July 6, 2021, after a nationwide search. Prior to taking the helm, Chief Talbot served as the chief for the Norristown Police Department in Pennsylvania for 7 years. Chief Talbot has over 25 years of law enforcement experience, having served as the director of the Bureau of Enforcement and Investigation with the Pennsylvania Department of State, the Reading, Pennsylvania Police Department, where he retired in 2011 as the Deputy Chief of Police and as a correctional officer at the Chester County Prison, where he began his law enforcement career. During his career, Chief Talbot has achieved a dramatic reduction in crime while serving as the police chief in Norristown, Pennsylvania, having reduced violent crime over a 3-year period by over 50%. He improved the department's relationship with the minority community, designed and implemented a data-driven management system that substantially increased productivity, and developed anti-leadership training for all agency supervisors. Additionally, he was rewarded in 2017 both the NAACP Community Leadership Award and the Freedom Foundation's Local Hero Award. Chief Talbot received his bachelor's degree from Pennsylvania State University in organizational leadership. He attended the Police Executive Research Forum's Senior Management Institute for Policing, Penn State's Police Executive Development Institute, and the University of Delaware's Criminal Justice Leadership Institute. He is a member of the International Association of Chiefs of Police, the Pennsylvania Chiefs of Police Association, and National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Officers, and the Virginia Association of Chief of Police. I introduce to you Mark E. Talbot, Sr.
Thank you. Uh, Scholar Tatum Baker, please stand, introduce yourself, and read the bio for Special Agent in Charge, Brian C. Duggan. Good enough.
Hello, my name is Tatum Baker. I attend Lakeview Elementary in Portsmouth, Virginia. I'm in the 6th grade. Director Christopher Ray named Brian Duggan as the special agent in charge of the Norfolk Field Office in Virginia. Most recently, Mr. Duggan served as a section chief of the Human Intelligence Section in the Directorate of Intelligence at the FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C. Mr. Duggan joined the FBI as a special agent in 1998 and was first assigned to the San Diego field office to mostly work cases related to white supremacist groups. In 1999, he transferred to the San Francisco field office to conduct Asian street gang investigations. In 2006, Mr. Duggan was appointed as an instructor at the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia, where he developed a new law enforcement and human intelligence courses for the FBI. He left the academy in 2009 to work on a violent gang squad in the Northern Virginia resident agency of the Washington field office. Mr. Duggan was promoted to a supervisory special agent and transferred to the Chicago field office in 2013 to lead a squad investigating child pornography and human trafficking. While in Chicago, he established a new gang squad addressing gun and gang violence on the north side. He was promoted to assistant special agent in charge of the counterintelligence branch at the Washington field office in 2017. His branch investigated and helped successfully prosecute media and espionage subjects and ran counter-proliferation operations. In 2019, Mr. Duggan was promoted to section chief in the Directorate of Intelligence, which has authority and responsibility for all FBI human intelligence functions. Prior to joining the FBI, Mr. Duggan served in the U.S. Marine Corps. He was commissioned as a second lieutenant and rose to captain and served in Japan, Korea, and Russia. He earned a Bachelor of Science in Criminal Justice from Pennsylvania State University and a Master of Business Administration.
Thank you, Tatum. Before we go on any further, scholars, if you have, in the absence of Assistant Chief Howard, he is not here right now, so if you have questions that pertains to the Norfolk Assistant Chief, they are open to any of the panelists, okay? Thank you, scholars, for introducing us to our panelists. We will now move into the question and answer portion of this event. Scholars who submitted questions should have their question with a number. Oh. Brian Statton, please stand up and introduce yourself and read the bio for Captain Mathis.
Good morning. My name is Brian Staten, and I go to Bethel High School, and I'm in 9th grade. Captain Gregory T. Mathis has commanded the Virginia State Police Bureau of Field Operations Chesapeake Division since September 2022 and has served with the VSP since 1998. Upon graduating the VSP Academy's 97 basic session, Mathis was assigned as a trooper to the BFO Richmond Division Area 3 office. In 2003, he was promoted to sergeant and assigned to the BFO Chesapeake Division Area 33. In 2012, he transferred to the Office of Internal Affairs, serving as an investigator until 2013, when he was promoted to first sergeant and assigned to the Bureau of Criminal Investigation. Chesapeake Field Office, Drug Enforcement Section. In 2015, he returned to the BFO, serving as first sergeant over the Area 33 office. In 2017, he was promoted to lieutenant and assigned to the BFO Chesapeake Division headquarters, where he remained until his promotion to captain. A native of King William County, Virginia, Mathis has a bachelor's degree in criminal justice and earned a master's degree in criminal justice administration from California Coast University. He is also a graduate of the University of Virginia's National Criminal Justice Command College.
Okay, now, again, thank you, scholars, for introducing us to our panelists. We will now move into the question and answer portion of this event. Scholars who submitted questions should have their question with a number. The number is in the order which you will ask your questions. Scholars, please make sure that you are paying attention to your number. So when it is your turn to ask your question, you are ready. Scholars, also please stand, say your name, the school you attend, your grade, before reading your questions. Scholars, also be sure to identify which panelist your question is for before asking your question. Scholars, do we have any questions? All right. Will the scholar with the number 1 please ask your question?
Hello, my name is Eric Gilchrist. My name is Eric Gilchrist, and I go to Bethel High School. I'm a freshman, and my question is for Chief Mark Talbot. Tell me why, as an African-American male, I should consider becoming a police officer.
Thank you for the question. As an African-American male, I think being a police officer is one of the most patriotic things that you can do. The reality of policing is that African Americans are deeply, deeply underrepresented, both in policing and in the rest of the criminal justice system. As long as we are so deeply underrepresented, I'm afraid that we are going to continue to suffer at greater rates than other members of society. Ultimately, the police are responsible for treating everybody the same and everybody fairly. But when the police have such deficits in terms of the lived experience of marginalized members of our country, it creates barriers to the type of understanding that we need to be effective. So ultimately, I made the choice at a really young age, probably 5, 6, 7 years old, when I just so happened to come across an African-American police officer in the small town that I grew up in. That police officer made a powerful impression on me. He was somebody that seemed to care about other people, somebody that seemed to be dedicated to reducing suffering in other people's lives. And that example is something that I wanted to replicate. Again, thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Will the scholar with number 2 please come and ask your question?
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. My name is Marcus Gann. I'm a senior and I attend Taft High School. My question is for Chief Drew. Why did you become a police officer?
Marcus, right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you for the question. So I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, Marcus. And if anybody's familiar with Cincinnati, it's a big baseball town. Now it's more known for football. And I wanted to play center field for the Cincinnati Reds. It didn't work out too well. So my grandfather was the chief police of a small town like Mayberry. And I mean, there were like two. And he was the chief of police there, and he was also the oversaw refuge and trash collection. And when I was a child, I can remember like 5 or 6 years old, he would allow me to walk with him in the community. And people would come off the front porch to talk to him. They'd be sweeping out the front of their business. And we would just, I mean, there were like 3 streets, New Madison, Ohio. And I would walk with him, and I would see people, how they interacted, and they always started with a handshake. And I remember him, you know, he wasn't that tall, but he was certainly taller than me. And he would put his hand on my shoulder, and he would always, what I remember at least, is he would tell me, it's always how you treat people. So from that, instilled in me and my parents, like I said, I wanted to play professional baseball. It didn't work out, but I enjoyed law enforcement. I think it gives us an ability to help other people and be of service, try to fix things and make things better. So for me, that was the driving factor, and just influences in my life, whether it was a youth pastor, baseball coaches in high school and college. But really, my grandfather was probably the biggest influence, and that's why I went into a field of law enforcement.
Thank you. For the response, Chief. Scarlett, with question number three. Number 3.
Everyone. My question is for Kat. My name is Philip Warner. I go to Greenland High School and I'm in 9th grade. My question is for Captain Gregory Matthews. How has policing changed since you joined the police force, and what are some of the pros and cons of the changes?
Thank you for the question. I've just celebrated my 25th anniversary with the state police and being in law enforcement. So things have greatly changed since that time. A lot of it is technology, a lot of it is training, and it's just a way that as the state police, we approach whether it's highway safety or just addressing crime in certain areas of the Commonwealth. Most of those changes have all been positive. We also, I'd say you just look at things different. You see how different views have changed from law enforcement officers as they come into the profession. We aren't as focused now on always, for troopers, for years, it's been, we issue traffic tickets. Most of our contact with folks was traffic related. You know, there was an emphasis put on always issuing a summons. Things are changed now. We look at that different. Maybe a warning is something that is appropriate to address that situation. So just things like that have changed over the years. You also we have more diverse workforce in the state police, whether it's, you know, different sexes, nationalities, things like that. They're all positive changes that have occurred. Thanks for your question.
Thank you for your response. Now, I have a question for the Chief of Hampton. So this would be a scenario. A police car gets behind me with lights flashing, and I am close to my home. Can I continue to drive until I reach my house so that my parents can talk to the officer, or no?
I'm gonna pass on that question. I'm gonna give you the advice I would give my son. You're a little bit older, you're a little bit better looking than him, so it might work out better for you. So I would tell my son, and I'll tell you, that the thing to do is to find a space to pull over as soon as you can do it safely. If you feel like you are close enough to home to get there and get yourself in a place that is going to maximize your safety and comfort with that traffic stop, then you do that. And you sit there and you turn your inner light on, you turn your dome light on, and you treat the police officer with the utmost dignity and respect. And if that dignity and respect isn't returned to you, you don't take issue with it on the side of the road. There are people like me and people like all of us on the panel here that get paid to make sure that any justice that was missing from that traffic stop is dealt with appropriately. But given the scenario that you offered, you're close to home, you want to have somebody close to you that you know cares about you and loves you. I have no issues with it, and by extension, none of the officers in the city of Hampton would have issues with it either.
Thank you. Scarlett with number 6.
Good morning. My name is Iman Monroe. I attend Bethel Christian School. I'm in the 10th grade. And my question is for Chief Mark Sulski. What is the most mentally challenging aspect of being a police officer?
Thank you for the question. Being a police officer has a lot of challenges, both physically and mentally. You know, coming across some of the calls we deal with on a daily basis, seeing people at their most vulnerable and sometimes meeting people on the worst days of their lives. It's very taxing on officers. So, you know, we try as best we can to be a light on their darkest day, for lack of a better description. But, you know, from things you see such as child abuse and animal abuse and calls like that, they do take a toll on officers. So we really place a heavy emphasis on mental wellness for police officers, that we're constantly monitoring their mental well-being, so that if we see someone is reaching a point of burnout, that we address that appropriately so it doesn't spill over into their contacts with people that they come in contact with on a daily basis. But for as mentally challenging as it is, it's also very rewarding. The fact that you do meet people on the darkest days of their lives and you're able to help them, that it's very rewarding. And it's something that I hope a lot of the young men here will consider the profession in law enforcement, to be that change you want to see and to be able to help people in the community. It's very rewarding and certainly outweighs the mental challenges. But thank you so much for the question.
Thank you for your response. We will now have question number 7.
Good morning. My name is Isaiah Frederick. I'm 14 years old. I attend Jones Middle Magnet School. And my question is for Chief Steve Drew. What does probable cause mean?
That's a great question. Where did you go to school? I didn't hear where you went to school.
Jones Middle Magnet School.
What grade are you in?
8th.
8th grade. So probable cause is what we teach officers in the academy, and every year by state mandate, we have to have so many hours of recertification each year. So when we talk about probable causes, is there information, is there a probable cause to respond or stop someone, to have some interaction with them, right? Is there probable cause for an arrest that we might detain someone for? So example, we see a group of individuals on a particular location, let's say a church lot that's closed down and they're breaking in. That's not probable cause for an arrest. It may be reasonable suspicion for us to go over and talk to someone and just hey guys, we got a call. And I'll tell you, I think one of the biggest problems for me that I see in law enforcement today is sometimes we don't explain that to individuals when we come up to. I believe if we take that time and have those conversations, it's a little bit clearer on why we're there and what we're doing, as opposed to if I were to walk up to a group of individuals, regardless of race or age or gender, hey, all of you, what are you doing? Come over here and give me your name, right? It's much different we got a call from individuals, they thought of breaking into a church. Can I talk to you guys? Here's the situation. Probable cause, what I'm going to look at is probable cause for an arrest is something has occurred, we're now investigating a crime, or there's enough probable cause to go here in Virginia to a magistrate to make an arrest. Oftentimes, with some of the more complex cases, and we have some experts in the room today, sometimes we will call some of our expert friends and say, this is what we have we met that burden? Some of the situations we've had in Newport News recently with an elementary school. We had some conversations with our Commonwealth attorney and just ran the situation by them. But probable cause, is there enough information to take the information to a magistrate for probable cause for arrest? Very different than reasonable suspicion that we're investigating something. But probable cause is a higher burden for that detention. That make you, we good? Anybody else want to add anything? I know, look, I'm telling you right now, we got an expert in the room. We got an expert in the room. You sure? Okay.
Just real quick to the scholars, when you come up and ask a question, please speak into the mic loud. Act like there's not a mic here, like you have to really project. We now have question number 8.
Hello, my name is Tatum Baker. I attend Lakeview Elementary in Portsmouth, Virginia, and I am in the 6th grade. My question is for Special Agent in Charge, Brian C. Duggan of the FBI. What policy changes need to happen to speed up the prevention of white supremacists and/or far-right individuals from infiltrating law enforcement police force and removing individuals with white supremacist and/or far-right beliefs from law enforcement?
Well, thanks for that heavy question. Appreciate that. So if I understood your question, is you're looking for laws or policy that'll help us work the domestic terrorism issue. And it is daunting because there's a lot of things that U.S. citizens have protections that in the domestic front, when we're looking at terrorism, we don't afford those same protections to foreign terrorists. So when we're looking at white supremacy, any type of domestic terrorism, we have to find, as Chief Drew said, indications that would lead to probable cause that there is a violation of law first, and that the expression of views by any side, left or right, is something that we hold sacrosanct in our Constitution. And so anybody that's taking that to the next level where they're espousing violence, the Supreme Court has said you can have freedom of speech, but you can't go in a movie theater and yell fire and cause people to be injured. So we have to find a fine balance of investigating people that are taking their far right, far left, whatever views too far and incorporating violence. And then we start digging into it and doing an investigation. I don't know if there is a stomach, and I'm not a policy person or a law person, I'm not a politician, if there's an appetite to start taking people's freedom of speech, freedom of thought away anytime soon. But thank you for your question.
We will now have question number 9.
My name is Deshaun Foster. I attend Booker T. Washington Middle in Newport News. I am in the 6th grade, and my question is to Chief Steve Drew. What changes in police training are needed to better prepare the officers in your department to use their arrest authority fairly impartially, and in a manner that is safe for the officer and me?
That's a great question. So when we talk about training, I would submit, and not speaking for anyone else, but I would imagine if you talk about law enforcement across the country, the number one thing that we try to focus on is training. And the question that Captain Mathias got earlier about how has it changed, I think training is one of the biggest aspects. Training is much longer than what some of us did 30 years ago. It's much more developed, it's much more advanced. So if I were looking at some things of training that I think that in law enforcement, I'm just going to speak for Newport News, okay? What I would like to see is so often in policing that I've been part of, but I've experienced in Richmond and here, is we have instructors come in that are law enforcement, they're wearing a uniform and it's a PowerPoint, and we're giving that information, and then we're taking a test and moving on, right? There's so many things that the state says that we have to cover, just like in high school. There's so many things that you have to cover to graduate. But I think we got to take that a step further, and all of the individuals on the panel are mentors to me, and individuals that are in the audience as well that we talk to about. I think we have to have maybe at least an addition and learn some more things about our history of law enforcement, our history in policing, our history in the city that we work. In Newport News, we have a shipbuilding. I would like to know, I'd like my officers to know how that came about. When did we expand and annex work? What is the history of our Southeast community? What's the history of the city of Newport News where officers are going to police? I think the other thing that we talk about is there's so many different things that law enforcement is asked to do today, whether it's dealing with domestic violence and issues with social media, homelessness, drug addiction, the things that at 5 o'clock, we're the ones still working. And individuals have plaques and diplomas on their wall that they go to school for 4, 5, 6 years to learn and be masters of those topics. We don't give any of our officers enough training in those things. So I think the more that we can do to bring in outside experts, to have a mother, for example, who might have a child that's autistic, I think we give a much better class on how to deal with calls with autism or how someone might act with autism as opposed to an officer who were reading it from a PowerPoint. Or someone on homelessness or issues on domestic violence, to have experts come in and talk to us. I can give a PowerPoint on the law, but it's much better to have Commonwealth attorneys come in and talk about, here is the burden, and this is what the state says, but if you really want to have a better case in court, this is where I would like to see us go with problem calls. So I think we always have to continue to look back on what we're doing, where we came from, and how do we get better. But for me, in our academy, we're trying to change to a more academic academy, much like the learning environment you have at school and in high schools and middle schools, that we're bringing in outside. We're learning different things, classes about psychology, classes about sociology, how one event can affect the whole community. So being from Newport News, we had an issue at an elementary school that affected our whole community. And I was not prepared as a chief how quickly that would affect things across not only our state, but across the country. So I think the better training we have, the more experience that we have in our officers, the more development. And even after they graduate the academy, we all do field training where we're with a more senior individual who we would ride together with. I think the more time we can put into training is really going to be a benefit for us in the long run. Now, it's challenging because we want officers on the street to be able to respond to calls, but I think training is the number one element that I think we still continue to need to look at, tweak. We can't teach officers the way we did in 1985 to police communities in 2023. We have to adapt, and sometimes that's hard for us. But I hope that answers your question, but I think training is the biggest component. Okay.
Thank you. I have a question for state police. A police officer stops me on a busy street. The officer comes to my car and asks for my driver's license and registration. I know I wasn't speeding, so I asked why he stopped me. Does the officer have a responsibility to tell me why I was stopped before I complied with his request to provide license and registration?
So the officer can come to you, the trooper can come to you and ask for your driver's license and your registration. He's not required by law to tell you right away why he stopped you. However, through the state police air training, this could be different for each department up here. I don't know their standards. When we first approach, because pretty much all of our traffic stops now being audio and video recorded. One of the first things they should do is identify themselves, explain to you that you're being audio and video recorded, and then go into why you were stopped. And while they're explaining that, you can be finding your driver's license or registration if that's what the direction that the officer's getting. I would say if they don't tell you right away why you're stopped, it's kind of like the chief said earlier, don't get into a confrontation with that officer at that time for that. Provide your documentation to them like they've asked. And if you feel like you weren't treated fairly or there needs to be some retraining for that particular officer on how they handle that situation, then make that, ask to speak to their supervisor after the fact and point that information out so we can address it at that time. Thanks.
We will now have question number 11.
Hello, my name is Anton Bell Jr. I'm in the 9th grade and I attend Ridgeway Preparatory Incorporated. My question is for Chief Mark Talbot. Why does it often seem like the community's perspective of unnecessary use of deadly force against an unarmed person conflicts with the police justification use of deadly force against an unarmed person? As Chief of Police, what are you doing to bridge this gap?
I don't know if there is any way to completely bridge the gap between how the community feels about an unarmed person getting killed. I think it's really important to consider the circumstance that you're talking about. If you're talking about George Floyd, that's called murder, and that's what the officer was charged with, and that's appropriate, and the community should never understand it or change perspective. It should always be outrageous. And there are many other police uses of force that looked outrageous and are outrageous. And I don't think that the community needs to change its perspective at all. I think the behavior itself has to change. Policing has to find more humane and just ways of interacting with the community. It's a public service. So ultimately, as much as we like to believe that it's up to us to determine whether or not our organizations are functioning well, it's up to the community. And if what we're doing is outrageous to the community, it's simply wrong because the community gets to judge the jobs that we're doing. Very often that gap in perspective is simply a factor of where the community thinks we should be and where we are. I think objectively, if you've looked at policing, and I can tell you from somebody who's been in it almost 30 years, it is better now than it was when I started. Trust me on that. It was far more abusive. It was far less diverse. It was far less just than it is now. But now, because of technology, we are seeing more of policing than we've ever seen before. And we can get this sense that the presence of videos indicates an increase in misconduct with the police. And I don't think that is objectively true. I do think it's objectively true we are falling even further short of public expectations than we ever have. And we have to take, I very frankly think it's a police chief problem. I don't think it's a police officer problem. I think it's a police chief problem. I think those of us in executive positions have to take a harder stand for justice and fairness. We have to take a harder stand against police misconduct. The question about training, I think, relates to this as well. Training has to extend to kindness and compassion, and it has to extend to understanding, and it has to extend to understanding why any particular community is like it is. We have to teach our police officers that offenders start out as victims. And what typically happens is a segment of the community is victimized over and over again. It is ignored, it's marginalized, no resources are put in that community, no upgrades, the sidewalks are crumbling, the playground is a mess, the school is failing, and ultimately those neighborhoods produce violence, and they produce injustice and a lack of resources. And then the police were sent into those neighborhoods. And sometimes we're producing more disadvantage in those neighborhoods. So I think a broader and deeper, like Chief Drew talked about, a broader and deeper understanding of what is happening and has been happening in urban America is deeply, deeply necessary. And if we ever get to the point where we can kill our citizens in this country without outrage, we've just lost our minds. And I think the problem just might be we're not outraged enough. You know, ultimately, if you look back on the number of months that passed since Tyre Nichols was killed right in our faces, how much outrage did we see about that? I saw very little. And I don't know whether we have outrage fatigue or not, but it seems like we moved past it way too quickly. So if anything, I would say, why isn't the community more exercised around unlawful death of its citizens? And the problem just might be the public is not outraged enough. And until we get to the point where that outrage extends to the point where we're still talking about all of the various instances of unlawful deaths of citizens, until we're continually having that discussion, we're going to return to it in very tragic and frustrating ways. So I think we got to flip that on its head. And we got to say that the outrage should be extremely intense, and it should be sustained, and it should extend to the political realm and the social realm in ways that actually force the change that I think most of us are looking for.
Thank you. We really thank our panelists for the great information. Scott, where it can be, at least keep down the responses to at least like a minute.
That's probably not gonna happen.
I figured that. We will now have question number 12.
Good morning. My name is April Lanning. I go to Oscar Smith High School, and I'm in the 9th grade. My question is for Chief Selesky. How many annual hours of training are officers in your department required to receive in communication skills and de-escalation techniques? How does this compare to the training they receive in firearms and defensive tactics?
The state of Virginia requires that police officers in Virginia attend at least 40 hours of in-service training every 2 years. However, officers on the Chesapeake Police Department are required annually to partake in de-escalation training. And we have many, many officers certified in critical incident training as well, when you're dealing with people with mental health. With respect to firearms, we're required to qualify twice a year, once between January and June, once between July and December. But I would say more time is spent on de-escalation and critical incident training than on firearms for sure. And that's the way it should be.
Thank you. Question number 13.
My name, my name is Kaylin Gibbs, and I go to Hugo Owens Middle School, and I'm in sixth grade. This question is for Chief Selesky. Chief Selesky. What kind of training do officers receive to work with people with mental health issues?
Great question. Once again, we have officers that are required to attend critical incident training and de-escalation techniques, because it is very challenging dealing with people with mental disabilities, because oftentimes officers don't realize what they're dealing with, that you may be dealing with someone that maybe is autistic, and you're asking them questions and they're not answering, and you just think they're ignoring you, when in fact they're suffering from some mental challenge that prevents them from processing the information and answering correctly. So it's very important that our officers have that training so that they don't misjudge what's going on when they're dealing with someone that has those sort of mental challenges.
I also have another question. What outside mental health agencies does your department work with?
We work with Chesapeake Integrated Behavioral Health Services and the Department of Human Services. And it's very important that we do work with those, because like Chief Drew said earlier, we're the 24-hour agency. So long after some of these other social services agencies have gone home, if people are experiencing a problem with a loved one where they're having some sort of mental breakdown, we're basically the department of last resort, because no one else is working at 2 o'clock in the morning. So it's very important that we keep up that relationship with those agencies, that if we see someone that's in need of services, even after hours, that we make the appropriate referral in the morning so that people can get the help that they need.
All right, thank you.
Question number 14.
Greetings, everyone. I'm Jacqueline Tooks, a homeschooled high school student. I'm a senior in high school. This question is for Chief Mark Talbot. What is the responsibility of the police in addressing the rate of killings in the city?
So our responsibility is to reduce it. It is, policing is unique in that it is a responsibility that is both professionalized. It's up to the police to work with the citizens to achieve safety, and it is our collective responsibility. Ultimately, death in the community, it tends to be as a result of a number of social conditions that have layered on top of each other in ways that shorten the lives of people whose lives are already full of suffering. And so you see dramatically different rates of years of life lost in poor communities. It is a phenomenon that is dramatically concentrated in the African-American community across the country in a normal year, not COVID years, because COVID years change crime figures dramatically, but in a quote-unquote normal year, you have somewhere around 18,000 homicides. I'm sorry, you have 18,000 homicides and about double that number suicides. About 70% of the homicides that occur are what's called community violence. And that's violence that's occurring in public spaces in urban communities. If we're going to put a dent into premature deaths related to criminal behavior, it means that we're going to do policing in a much more precise way that's designed to get at the root causes of that violence. And some of the root causes are victimization, and some of the root causes are related to how we are looking at violence as a dispute resolution mechanism. I like to point out that when you have violence, it's typically at the end of communication. So in other words, violence begins when communication fails. I think it is a process of identifying the social networks that are disproportionately represented in all our cities. It's not something that just afflicts everybody in the community. We spend too much time trying to fix everybody when there's a significantly small number of people that legitimately are going to be involved in lethal violence. We got to get to those folks. We have to get resources to those individuals, and we frankly have to identify the small number of people who are moving around in our communities that are life-threatening. We have to identify those folks, and we've got to pull them out of the community.
Thank you.
Thank you. Question number 15.
Hello, my name is Jordan Rouse. I'm 16. I go to Bethel Christian School and I'm a sophomore. My question today is directed to Captain Gregory Mathis, who according to my info is part of the Virginia State Police. What social and economic factors are contributing to the crime rate in 2023, and how have these factors changed over the last 10 years?
Well, that's a tough one. I'll probably need some help from the panel on this one because I think, my role or my agency's role is slightly different in the Hampton Roads region, meaning that for the most part, we're on the interstate. If we come off the interstates, it's typically an assist to help these agencies. So I'm not faced with some of the same situations that these gentlemen's departments are. So I would ask if anyone has any insight to that could help out.
So I think all of us may chime in, but I would just say some of the issues, if I understand your correction, what's leading to, or what are we seeing a difference or increase in crime? The things that I'm seeing more and more is the number of firearms that are in our communities, how quickly those firearms are passed around into other crimes, how they could, one firearm that may be used because of ballistics, we're able to tell that happened in Newport News, or might be linked to something in Chesapeake or Norfolk or Hampton. I think that's what we have to communicate. But the number of firearms concern me, the type of firearms that are out in our communities, the high-powered weapons that are out there, the manipulation of firearms that can turn into the Sears, the automatic, making them automatic weapons. And I'm more and more concerned at the number of rounds that we're finding at crime scenes. And it keeps me up at night on the number of ages of individuals who have these firearms and are using them. I have not seen that in my 30 years. I remember back in the 90s when we had the big drug wars in the late 80s and early 90s, but the stuff with younger people, the amount of firearms, the type of firearms that are out there are very, very concerning to me in today's policing. That wreaks havoc in numerous communities. Individuals that may have a house shot into, a vehicle shot into, the youth with firearms and the number of firearms out there. That would be, I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in on that, but firearms and the type of firearms we're seeing is probably the biggest concern for me right now.
Assistant Chief Howard, would you like to add on to that question?
Good morning. I think Chief Drew hit it right on the head. I know that in Norfolk, we're seeing that very same thing. Very concerning with the ages of the people that we're seeing with these guns. And we're talking as young as 9, 10 years old. And when you put that together with the type of firepower that we're seeing out there, these automatic weapons, it is a recipe for disaster. It's a recipe for tragedy. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to get to the root of the origins of these weapons. And in Norfolk for the last several years, we've been tracing these weapons, trying to find out where they're coming from to attack it from that angle. It's one of the things that we're doing. And as they mentioned previously, different ballistics testing and things of that nature. So we're trying to make a dent in it, but we're going to be working with our citizens, other agencies, to include our neighboring jurisdictions, federal partners, state partners. So it's a battle that we're all going to have to fight together, but it's one that we're going to be in for the long haul.
Thank you. Question number 16.
Good morning. My name is Philip Warner. I'm from Greenland High School, Virginia Beach, and I'm not good. My question is for Assistant Chief Daryl Howard. What does the data say about the rate of arrest of African Americans in comparison to whites?
That's a very good question. Thank you. Ironically enough, in Norfolk, we have undertaken a study with a nonprofit organization to directly look into that. And what we're finding is basically what we expected. The rate of arrest for African Americans is significantly higher than our white counterparts. What we're trying to do is, first of all, bring that data to the forefront so that everybody in the public can, first of all, see it, but then not only see it, but then to put it into context. And by that, I mean, look at the data, analyze it to figure out why we're having these differences in the rates of arrest. If that means that we have to change the way that we're policing, then that's what we do. So right now, it's probably going to be in the next couple of months, you'll probably see something in the news where you will see that Norfolk is conducting studies related to that. So what we want to do is be transparent, not run away from the problem, because if you run away from the problem doesn't get solved. So we're going to meet it head on. We're going to take our lumps because we know that it's not going to be pretty. But that's the only way to attack that problem, and that's what we're going to do.
Thank you. Question number 17.
Good morning. My name is Cornell Burke. I am 17 years old and I'm in the 11th grade and I'm also homeschooled. My question is for Chief Steve Drew of the Newport News Police Department. What challenges are you experiencing as you try to balance maintaining public safety and public demand for reform in policing?
So I think there's three things. The first, I think that my friend Chief Talbot talked about building relationships, right? Why we're here today, having conversations and building relationships in communities. I need communities to trust men and women who wear this uniform and do this job, and I think we need men and women to trust the communities and build relationships so we can solve crime together. If it's all about law enforcement, we're already way behind with that. It has to be a global approach. So that's one, is trust between citizens and law enforcement. The second is what we've talked about up here a couple times about training, doing better. How do we get better? I would agree with Mark. I think that we're better today than we were yesterday, but I also believe that we're going to be better tomorrow, right? As we all are most of us are on the tail end of our careers. That's the future, right? So when you all sign up to join the police department, you all will be part of that change, right? But I think we have to look, how do we get better? And then I think the third part is, so we're bringing the right people into this profession, building relationships with our community. And I think the third part is taking a hard look at what do we want law enforcement to do? And I think Mark and others kind of talked about, what do we want law enforcement to look like? What does our communities want? Should we be sending law enforcement officers to a call where someone may be homeless or having a mental situation, whatever that might be? The problem is, after 5 o'clock, there's not a lot of people out there to respond to that. So I think that we have to ask our other partners, human services, our community boards, our schools, our other entities, and then private grassroots organizations, right, to all play a role in how do we reduce crime, how do we address issues. I guarantee you that people in the community know more about crime than police do. We got to find a way to open that, break that door down of isolation, communicate, work together, because at the end of the day, we're all in this together, right? Your neighborhoods are our neighborhoods, and we've got to make that happen.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
My turn. I have a question for Assistant Chief Howell. During a traffic stop, the officer asks to search my car. Do I have to consent to allow my car to be searched?
Absolutely not. If he has probable cause, then he will, of course, act upon that. But if there is no probable cause, then you have the right to say, no, I don't want you to search my car. It's as simple as that. And I will tell you this, and this is something that I tell my son as well. Don't engage in an argument on the street. You abide by the directions of the officer on the street. You get home, and then you let me deal with everything after that. Don't let the situation escalate, absolutely.
Question number 19.
My name is Donovan Rice. I'm a 16-year-old junior at Nansemond River High School. And my question is to Special Agent in Charge, Brian Dugan. How does the duties of the FBI impact local law enforcement efforts?
So there's a lot of crossover with what we do in the community with our law enforcement partners in a lot of different aspects. So one, on the violent crime aspect, we're partners with all of these departments here in the state police to reduce crime, to investigate crime, and to impose consequences on those that are increasing the violence in our neighborhoods and our communities. In the same vein, we're also trying to build the collaboration with communities, with the outside partners that can help address violence and build trust between law enforcement and the communities, so that there's more people that want to come forward. And so we have our role in that as well. And on top of that, the FBI has the role of investigating civil rights violations. So there's a lot of different layers that the FBI's role is within law enforcement, that we police our own, but we also police with the police. And so it's a fine balance we have to make with all of our partners. Thank you.
Question number 20.
This question goes to Brian T. Dugan. What is the role of the FBI in enforcing civil rights laws? Please explain the legal requirements that must be met for the FBI to investigate and prosecute a person or organization for violating civil rights law.
Thank you very much for that question. So the civil rights laws are different than necessarily looking at assault, manslaughter that might be on the state side of things. So for civil rights, we have to establish whether or not the act was willful and it violated someone's civil rights. So what that means is, did someone deprive someone of their civil rights? That could be simply just seizing somebody when it wasn't warranted, or it could be over and above use of force. But then we have to also establish, and the biggest thing that we have a hurdle to is establishing the willfulness of that act. So how we prove that is, if training says that you're not allowed to use a baton on someone's head, and the officer used the baton in the appropriate way, and the training says that's wrong, that's a way to show willfulness. If there's statements that the officers have made that shows that they did this on purpose or for a biased reason, that can show us willfulness. But if we can't establish the willfulness because it was an ugly act that was caught on camera, but they were doing their job as best they could, and we can't establish that this was a willful disregard of the person's civil rights, we can't establish that civil rights violation. The other part of the coin about this is a lot of times you hear about the Department of Justice is investigating something. You heard about it during Breonna Taylor. You heard a little bit about Derek Chauvin's case. What the FBI and Department of Justice will do is allow the state to run its course first, so that the state, who's more closely related to the community, has a chance to seek justice on the state or local level. And then the Department of Justice will determine whether or not there needs to be more justice involved. So an example of Derek Chauvin, if you remember, there was really no word about whether or not the Department of Justice or FBI were involved in that, because the Department of Justice wanted that trial to go forward, to not taint the jury or the jury pool, and so that the state had an opportunity to take one of their own officers to trial and prove guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Right after he was found guilty, Department of Justice went to the grand jury and got civil rights charges for Derek Chauvin right after, allowing the state to do their thing first. Thank you.
Question number 21.
This question is for Special Agent in Charge Brian C. Duggan. What changes are needed to enhance internal police accountability standards?
So the FBI does not go into police departments to change policy or procedures. Department of Justice has means to go into the communities and work with the cities and the police departments to work on patterns and practices. Often what the FBI is doing is simply working with the police departments against violence and then looking at civil rights violations. However, and this is not really from the FBI, but we have the National Academy where police officers go to for further education. And that means from police officers and chiefs like you see on the panel have done the research and sponsored the ABLE program, which is the Active Bystander for Law Enforcement program, which has changed the dynamic about how officers interact with the community by having the partner obligated or have the tools on interceding when the situations may be going in a bad direction. It's kind of like modeled off of co-pilots flying with the pilot in command, and the pilot in command is making a mistake that can cause an accident, giving the tools for that co-pilot to intercede and tell them stop pushing that button or stop diving the plane toward the ground. How do we intercede? And so the ABLE program that the National Academy has put forward through our law enforcement partners is one of the ways that hopefully we're giving tools to law enforcement to have better interactions with the community.
Thank you.
Question number 22.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Zion Clifton. I am a junior at Churston High School. This question goes out to Captain Gregory Matthias. Matthias,
Matthias, correct. Good job.
And okay, as we all know, there is a high demand for police reform in today's community. So I was wondering, how has this demand impacted your feelings on the African American community's perspective of law enforcement? How does this reform affect your views on the way that people view you as an officer?
Well, thanks for the question. So I think we don't need reform to earn the respect of the community. So I think if we just hold ourselves accountable as law enforcement, as a captain of the state police, if I hold the supervisors below me to make sure that they're holding the troopers below them accountable, we can start achieving, gaining the respect of the community. When you see incidents like what occurred in Memphis, I don't know that reform is going to prevent that, because that was a crime. That's murder. We shouldn't have to have a reform to enforce the law. And I think that occurred by those people involved being arrested, right? But I think it's just coming to events like this, engaging with the community, and getting an understanding of also ideas that you could give us to help us go back and create change. I think that's where we start.
I have one last question. This is for all of the panelists. What advice can you give to us so that we never have a negative encounter with law enforcement? Guess we can, whoever wants to start.
I'll start since the microphone is close to me. One thing I always tell people is that when you have an encounter with law enforcement, try to remember that even though they have on a uniform, they wear the gun and the badge, that they are human. And I also tell my officers that very same message. Think of that person as somebody that is in your family, that's a loved one of yours. Treat that person with the respect and dignity that you would expect your mother to be treated with, your father, your wife, your loved one. Try to answer the questions the best you can. Try to keep your tone in such a way that you don't project disrespect, because that oftentimes is what causes things to start to unravel. But the basic thing is just treat people the right way. Talk to people the right way. If you can do those things 9 times out of 10 on both sides, we're going to have a good encounter.
I agree with everything that he said. I think the respect goes both ways. So I think setting the tone of that interaction in the right direction from the beginning, the moment it starts, that is what is needed.
So I'll take a little bit of a different tack on this. I was just talking to someone earlier about this. I've been in law enforcement for about 24 years. I carry a badge, I carry a gun, and if Greg Matthias's guys are pulling me over, I still get the hair in the back of my head standing up. And I still, even when in, I call this my uniform, I still put my hands on the wheel, I turn on the dome light, because anytime we have an interaction when it's unknown, it's a significant emotional event for all of us, even for someone that's been in uniform or been in the service for a while. And so the best thing, as these gentlemen have been saying, is just cooperate, get through it. It's an emotional event. And then if there's something that was wrong about it, and I've talked to some of these chiefs, they randomly check body-worn camera just to make sure that their guys are treating the community right, and they're not going to the other way or going off the reservation. So if we all collaborate and treat each other with respect, we'll get through those incidents when we have those contacts. Thank you.
I would echo. I think you're going to hear the same thing. I think one, it all starts with respect. Now, I will tell you, in law enforcement, we are held to a higher standard. I think supervision plays a role. I think training plays a role. And I'm really going to go back to what I said at the beginning. I think the more conversation we have, if young people know, if they see me and they say, hey, there's Chief Drew, or there's Steve, and they call me by name, and it's a relationship, right? I think it all starts there with that relationship, that we work together. If me and Cornell know each other, we can have a conversation much quicker than if we don't. So I think it's all about relationships, about respect. I think supervision plays a role in things we look and scrutinize ourselves and how do we get better. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, we take these uniforms off, we're all the same, right? You go to a crime scene, and God forbid, the blood is red on that street corner. We're all the same. We just have to be able to communicate and respect one another.
I would say it's important to always behave in a way that makes the people in your life that you love proud of you. If you're always striving to make the people that you know care about you proud, you're going to navigate your life very effectively, and you're not going to have to worry about much. I would also say when it comes to the police, it's important to understand that you have the rights that you know about. If you don't understand your rights, if you don't know what they are, you essentially don't have them. So take the time to talk to the adults and authorities and teachers in your life about what do you have the right to do and what do you have the right not to do, and what's appropriate in the presence of police. Get really clear on that. So that you understand the interaction. I will say, I would encourage you to develop a good relationship with a police officer or somebody who works in the criminal justice system that you can trust. I often speak to people that have been stopped by the police, and I'm not going to tell you, I can tell you what policy is, and I can also tell you what is a good idea and what's not a good idea. So build a relationship with somebody in the criminal justice system that you can trust. And then finally, I'll say, if you develop a general practice of treating people better than they expect to be treated, you're going to find that most that you come across, police officers or not, are going to go out of their way to help you and be helpful to you.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, the very simple answer to your question, and I'm going to repeat what's been said only because it's worth repeating. The very simple answer to avoid a negative encounter with the police is just to follow the instructions you're given at the time. To say, I'm not going to give you my ID until you tell me why you stopped me, or I'm not going to do this unless this, will probably lead to a negative encounter. Just about every agency here, their officers wear body-worn cameras. So there's nothing that the officer can do to you on the side of the road that can't be undone. If he treats you unfairly, writes you a ticket, the ticket can be dismissed. If he arrests you on a charge he shouldn't have arrested you for, the charge can be dismissed. But if the situation escalates and force has to be used, and unfortunately if deadly force was used, there's no way to undo that. So as a police officer myself, if I come over here to Hampton to visit, and I'm in plain clothes, and a police officer says, put your hands on the wall, I'm not going to say, I'm not doing that. I'm a police officer. Tell me why you're stopped. He's probably stopped me for a reason. I probably look like someone that they're looking for. So I'm just going to follow the instructions I'm given to avoid having a negative encounter. And after it's over, and he's willing to explain to me why he stopped me, if I felt I was treated unfairly, every one of us has an internal affairs division. We're going to investigate, and we work hard to weed out any bad apples that we might have. But that's the simplest answer I can give you. Just follow the instructions. And again, if the officer was wrong, it'll be undone. But that's the simplest way to avoid a negative encounter.
Well, we thank all of our panelists. Can we give a hand clap? We will now have the president of the Hampton Roads Committee of 200 Plus Men, Mr. Jimmy Gray.
Gentlemen, thank you for indulging us this morning with your time. This is an important conversation to have. I think the young men asked some great questions, but more importantly, we appreciate your great answers. And I know that there are a lot of demands on your time throughout the week and probably other request for your time on the weekend, and but we really appreciate you agreeing to be a part of this conversation, because I think when you look at these young men, you know, we see, you know, we can look at them two ways. One is that they're going to be criminals, or they may be the next victim of a crime, or they may be the next incident that blows up nationally involving an encounter with a police officer. But yet at the same time, they could also be future police officers and future police chiefs and law enforcement, FBI, and that's really what we want for our young men in our community. And I think it starts with what I can't remember what, maybe it's Chief Drew, but I would challenge these young men to get to know a police officer. Start with these gentlemen right here. These are the chiefs from your cities. Get to know them, or find an opportunity to have a relationship with another police officer so that we can build this bridge and really kind of, you know, eliminate these opportunities where we have these kinds of negative encounters. Now, I think our young men are more aware, more knowledgeable this morning after discussion, but really on behalf of our community and Hampton Roads community of 200+ million, I sincerely thank you for giving your time to our folks this morning, our young men, to have this conversation. So thank you. Give them another round of applause.
Well, that concludes our panel discussion. We thank all of you for coming out, and yeah, so have a good one.
Good to see you, brother.
Always.